So this week on Aristeia 99, we're going to be talking about Taowu. So Taowu is the final character of the Smoke and Mirrors expansion. He is possibly one of the most annoying characters I've run across in the game. It's not that I necessarily think he's, this terrible, awful person, but the thing he centers around is, well, we'll get to that. Real quick overview of his stats. He has an initiative of 5, a movement of 3, energy of 5, and a health of 2. He's not particularly fast, and he goes squish. That's going to tell you right now, he's a support character. But the way he does support is, in MMO terms, debuffing. And you see this first and foremost, actually, when he gets to his defensive role. 2 black dice and 2 bangs. Going a little out of order for me. The 2 bangs means he automatically gets his switch. Your opponent must choose and discard 1 tactic. So right then and there, he's got a okay chance of getting 2 shields, 2 blocks, but really the initial discouragement from attacking him is the fact that you will have to discard a card. Now you do get to choose it, which does take a little bit of the sting out, but still, especially early on, that's just not something you necessarily want to do. Next up for his brawl roll is 2 bangs. For his disengage roll, 2 bangs. So if you're trying to get away from him, well, you're going to get away from him, but it'll cost you 1 tactic card to do so. Likewise, if he's trying to get away from you, he actually can't from there. But just him trying gets him an automatic discard 1 of your cards. You're kind of seeing the trend here, aren't you? Now, obviously, if you do need to disengage with him, you're going to have to play a card that'll add a die to his roll. Or you're going to need to cash in focus, for instance. But regardless, this is 3 situations where automatically he gets a switch. There's no argument. There's nothing about it. He just gets it. And the opponent has to discard a card. This can be very, very annoying depending on what deck your opponent is playing, but also how thin their hand is. The more cards they have, maybe the easier it is to make that choice, but as you start getting further into the game and you have fewer and fewer cards in your hands, then it starts becoming more painful to discard, because then you're starting to have to make real cost value evaluations right there on the spot, and you have to do it. This is pretty much the defining annoyance of Taowu. And again, 2 bangs, character switch. Your opponent must choose and discard a tactics. His first ability is a green ability. Taowu has no direct offensive actions except for contender, which honestly, you're probably better off getting people to discard cards. But for 3 points, he has Paralyzing Terror. It's a blue, it is a yellow. You need 1 success. You've got a not bad chance of hitting his character switch. This is range 1 to 4, no line of sight required. So that right there is fairly powerful, just because he can do it opposite terrain, opposite other characters, whatever. It's a short range, but no line of sight required kind of means you can hide back. And I think that's a great counterbalance right there. So if you get a success, you can impose the immobilized states to the target. But your target, as part of this ability, your opponent may choose and discard a tactics card to nullify the effect of a switch in this action. So if you get Paralyzing Terror's switch, which is a block and a bang, you impose the immobilized state to a target within range 1 to 4. And, well, why would you want to do that instead of going with this success? Well, the wording here is kind of important. Your opponent may choose and discard a tactic to nullify the effect of a switch in this action. So, not only do you have two chances, really, of two different ways of getting the effect off. You could do it to one character. You could possibly get it to two. But the switch, which I would say is probably the preferable of the two, if you're trying to deny them tactics, you can just go ahead and say, oh, by the way, you have to discard if you don't want to be immobilized. So it's a little bit of a blackmail situation. Likewise, if you don't want to give them that choice, then you hope for a success, which again is not an unreasonable chance given the blue and the yellow. Next up is hallucinations. It's 1 energy. It's 2 blue dice. This is kind of fun because it's not super success orientated like if it was oranges, but you got 2, so that's nice. If you get a success, you place a smoke token on a spot in a spot range 0 to 2, line of sight required. If you get the switch here, which requires a success and a bang, choose a space within range 1 to 3, no line of sight, containing smoke or an immobilized character. Place yourself adjacent to that space. That's kind of cool because you've got a way to pass out smoke, you've got a way to pass out immobilization. And if you're happen to be using another character that can inflict either, that's a nice little jump for just 1 energy. Certainly it's cheaper than him moving, spending 2 energy to get his movement up by 3. So you do have that. Now it's worth pointing out though, this is a switch. So it will take effect before actually resolving the smoke placement. So you actually have to do it, then place the smoke. So the timing on hallucinations does make it interesting. You wouldn't be able to place the smoke, then jump to it. You have to jump someplace, then place the smoke. So do keep that in mind, but it does mean you can set up the preceding characters. Say you're using Cosmo or you're using Valkyrie, someone like that. They can go ahead and start handing out the immobilizes or the smoke tokens, and this it helps him get around. Bixie would be another one. Finally, his orange passive ability is called Phantasmagorical Aura. Your opponent cannot draw tactics when you go to the infirmary. So basically, Taowu, keeping on his annoying ways, he's got all these ways for you to discard cards. And when you finally get rid of him, well, you don't get to draw a tactic because of it. So it's, again, a little more denial. He's thinning your deck, whether you like it or not. And it takes a little of the victory out of sending him to the infirmary. So it's a very annoying ability. There's so much on him I would want to silence, but that's a good one right there. Silence that, send him to the infirmary, get a little bit of schadenfreude, and carry on. So we're going to go on to his tactics. First off, we're going to lead off with the mind reading. At the beginning of the activation of any character, choose a tactic in your opponent's discard pile and place it next to your control panel. You can play that tactic as if it was in your hand. After playing that tactic, return it to your opponent's deck and shuffle their deck. So it is double-edged. You are basically fishing a card out for them to go back in their deck if you use it. But at the same time, you get to use that tactic. Certainly with the advent of Sterling Forge and TCOM, there's a lot more cards you might want to grab. There's one from Oberon, that's the wrong. There's one where you can pull out a third tactic for any character that immediately comes to mind. What if? So, but at the same time, you can also just decide, I'm going to take that and I'm just going to keep it here and never use it. And I've just basically denied you that card again. And I think for any given matchup you're going to think of a couple of cards just like, I don't want them to get them back again. I really do not want them to get them back again. And this again gets into Taowu's very annoying deck manipulation. This is a cheerful card. I have not had a chance to use it yet myself. But it's just, it's something that's very powerful either way it's used, whether you're using it for denial or if you're fishing, and yeah, they'll get it back again, but you get to use it first. That's pretty awesome. Next up is No. So this is currently the only other No in the game, aside from the one in the standard tactics deck that comes with the core Aristeia set. When an opponent plays a tactics, but before applying its effect, cancel the effect of the opponent's tactic. This is probably one of my favorite cards, period. I would say that because it is a reactive card, it is an amazing reactive card, don't get me wrong, but there are times when you want to be more proactive. This is not a card for that, but it is, especially, again, with TCOM, Sterling Forge, not so many people using standard, or they don't have to. It really is the universal answer to every tactic, including No. You can know a No. Or in this case, you could know a No that node. So, great card. Love the card. You might want just one. Two, that's great. I wouldn't necessarily concern myself too much with that. Not for a short game. A long game, perhaps, but not necessarily a short game. So it is something to keep in mind, though, that, again, you are negating something in their deck that they were probably counting on or was kind of clutch at the moment. And there's such a huge litany of cards that are No appropriate, that they are No worthy, that if anything, you have to be careful not to use it too soon, too early, too recklessly, or at the same time, you don't want to be too stingy with it. This is a card that requires some thought and strategy behind it. I love it, but let's move on. Next up is Confusion. Hey, you remember Hannibal's got that cool card where you can change the running order of your characters on your team? Well, Taowu's got that, except he messes with the other team. During the action step of one of your character's activations, swap the position of two of your opponent's initiative cards. Why do you want to do that? Same reason for Hannibal, but you flip it. So someone's in a bad position, someone's in a good position, switch their order. Someone's in the infirmary, make them go again. They can't go, so basically it skips a turn. There's just a lot of things you can do creatively with this, but really what it comes down to is messing timings. Anyone who plays Aristeia for a while will know that your lineup, who goes first, second, third, and fourth, is very important, and that if that gets messed up, that order, it changes things. It's kind of it's unsettling for one, but it just, the fact that you could do that to your opponent as opposed to beneficially changing your own lineup reactively is really good. I mean, honestly, if you got Taowu and Wild Bill on the same time, on the same team, this would just really mess up the game in a great and awesome way, and would be a good thing to know. So, Finally, we're going to look at ignorance. During the action steps of one of your character's activations, your opponent must choose and discard a tactic in their hand for each of their characters that have at least one states token. Now, obviously with Taowu, he can hand out immobilized, that's it. Smoke, not a state token, wouldn't affect them. So this does depend on, I would say, the rest of your team composition as well as theirs. You run into the similar situation with Pavardi in that she's better when there are states being handed out versus not. Same with Bachman. This is extremely powerful in that situation. So if they have a lot of positive states on them, so say they've got Hippolyta who's passing out +2 initiative tokens like it's candy. If they have Lakshmi who is handing out focus tokens, if you've got a bunch of them immobilized or dazzled or poisoned or anything, this you could get 1, 2, 3, 4 tactics discarded all at once. That is crazy, but it requires setup, and honestly, it's that is a again, this is a no-worthy card that could really wreck somebody, especially if they don't have a lot of good ways to get more cards back in their hand. If they don't have Wild Bill in his switch, if they're not likely to be sending a lot of your characters to the infirmary, if they're not scoring more than you. There's getting cards out of your hand tends to be easy. Getting them back in can be a little challenging. And this could really set back a lot of game plans. And certainly, he doesn't actually have to be close enough to anyone to do this. There's no range on it. But those states have to be on them first. If there's only one character with the states on their team, I wouldn't say it's worth it. 2 would be good. 3 is great. 4 would be amazing, but I would not bet the bank on it. You do need to be realistic at times, and if you've got Taowu, they're probably going to be mindful of the fact you could have ignorance. So that's Taowu. That's the end of the Smoke and Mirrors block of characters. 4 characters are great characters, and is the second expansion I recommend for most new players. Next up, we're going to be going over kind of one of the tricky ones, and that would actually be Human Fate. So till then, this is Chikahiro. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, subscribe to Shameless Mayhem, and aloha from Maui.